I wrote from a place of trauma, like just having gone through several different traumatic events and kind of like how after each one it was just like, wow, okay, I'm never going to be the same after this. These are huge, life-changing moments, and I'm ultimately in a place I can't come back from.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. I'm glad you're right here with me. My name is Tyler Herrera, and this is Hardcore Dropout. So that clip you heard up front was my friend Cameron Miller. He is the singer of DUHKHA. He also sang in a band called Seizures. And of course, he's a rad human. So he's one of those people that I've only known for about like 6, 7 months now. But as we kind of talked and went through our history and stuff, we realized, holy shit, we know a lot of the same people. We've been in the same room together on multiple occasions. We were even on the set of a 18 Visions music video together back in California. So this was a really cool episode because it felt very personal to me, because it turns out Cam and we really had like a very similar experience growing up on like Southern California metalcore bands like 18 Visions and Bleeding Through and all the Trustkill stuff that was coming out of Southern California at the time. And again, we realized we were even at shows together at the same time, which is just so fucking cool. And one of the things I love about this hardcore and metal community. So we talk about Orange County, we talk about venues like Chain Reaction and Showcase, we tell some stories about it. And then we touch on his band DUHKHA, because really, in my opinion, they're one of the most refreshing metalcore bands out right now. So we get into their most recent album, A Place You Can't Come Back From. We get into their creative process. We talk about Cam's visual art that he does for the band. And it was just a really inspiring conversation for me, because it touched on that DIY aspect of hardcore. It touched on, again, all these personal things to me. And it just reminded me like hardcore and metal is full of so many rad humans. And I'm so grateful that with this platform, I get to talk to them. So without further ado, Cameron, welcome to Hardcore Dropout.
Thank you. Nice to
Stoked
see
to
you, Tyler.
Likewise, yeah, I'm stoked to
Yeah.
have you on here. And I mean, we talked about this a while ago, so it feels like a bit of a milestone to get you on here. So thanks again,
Um,
man.
no, thank you. It's cool to hang and talk to you about this stuff.
Like we were talking about just before we jumped on, you're from Orange County, so I'm really curious, what was like, what was early Cameron like where at in Orange County were you when you started to discover heavy music?
My neighborhood, my older neighbors, they specifically Steve, childhood friend, he had like a bunch of, well, I think he was like 4 years older than me, and he had a bunch of mixed CDs from friends that would get passed along around like our friend group. And we all we all skated together, so we would be, down at shopping centers and, in other people's cars and throwing on heavy music. And uh, yeah, I had to have been 12, 13 years old. So down in South Orange County at the time, which would have been like 2000, 2001.
Okay, hell yeah.
Well,
So did skating come first or did the music come first?
well, heavy music, skateboarding definitely came first before heavy music did, but music was always like a big deal with my family in the house growing up. So I had always loved music, and then I had heard, you know, heavier stuff on skate videos or MTV, just Beavis and Butthead and Headbangers Ball, 120 minutes, those things back in the day.
Hell
Um,
yeah.
yeah, just influence from older friends, but mostly like I'd say skate videos had like the biggest effect on me, biggest
Hell yeah.
influence. Yeah.
That's awesome. Cause I mean, being in Orange County, you're in such a like ripe scene for both skating and music of like all kinds. Cause there's a lot of punk bands that come from Orange County. There's metal bands, there's hardcore. So like, did you realize it at the time that like all this stuff was coming from nearby?
No. Um, in fact, I was thinking about it, and I didn't realize like you could. I mean, like I was young, and I didn't go to a lot of concerts when I was young or anything. Like I went to a few, and then it all kind of opened up in my teenage years. But I didn't realize that these punk bands were from my own like area, my own backyard, you know.
Yeah.
And somebody would say, "Oh, they're this band's playing down the street. You want to go see them?" And like one of my first shows was seeing Bleeding Through and
Damn.
Death Star. It wasn't my first show. I get the timeline mixed up, but it was at this church called St. Edward's Church in Dana Point, and went and saw that with some friends, and it blew my mind that I'm like watching heavy aggressive music and that we just listened to the CD, you know, in the car.
Yeah.
There was no barricade. It was like these guys were walking past me, you know, they were tangible, you know, they weren't microscopic people on a stage. So that blew my mind. And my friends started pointing it out and, you know, telling me these guys were from up the street, you know, in Costa Mesa or Newport or wherever they were from. So
Yeah. That's so
yeah,
sick. And I mean, I guess, you said this was like early 2000s, right?
yeah,
Yeah. So it's such a different time where like you can't necessarily go home and jump on your phone, or even at that time, early internet. You can't really find out where these people are from besides like liner notes and word of mouth. So the discovery process is so much slower.
yeah. And I wasn't getting these CDs yet really until I don't know, maybe my eighth grade freshman year, you know? So I wasn't
Hmm.
even looking at liner notes for hardcore records. And then I remember putting the dots together. I've mentioned this before when I saw that, you know, like members of Throwdown shared members with 18 Visions and members with Bleeding Through
Yep.
and Adamantium. And I was like connecting the dots, you know, and it blew my mind. I was like, these guys are all in the same bands.
Yeah.
But they all sound the same. Or I
Yeah.
mean, they don't sound the same. They all sound different. That's what I meant to say. But
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
and each one was kind of, in a way, responsible for their own like contribution to different sounds.
big time. Yeah.
Man.
Um, Adamantium that was the first official hardcore, like the From the Depths of Depression CD was like the first hardcore record I'd ever heard. And
Fuck yeah.
yeah, I got obsessed with that. And um, finding out that those guys were from down the street or up the street rather, it blew my mind.
Yeah.
It's just so cool.
Yeah. That's not something you get to see every day. Is like you said, like you're listening to this CD, you're discovering these bands, and then the next thing you know, you're going to a show, and it's like you're within 20 feet of them. Like that's a special experience.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
so awesome.
especially down. I mean, like that show I was talking about, the Bleeding Through one, specifically, that was less than a mile from my house,
Damn.
and that just seeing what they became too during my high school years, being able to say like, yeah, I'm seeing him at Chain, but I saw him like down the street from my house playing in a
Yeah.
church, which was nuts. So
Yeah. Absolutely.
yeah,
Um, yeah, we'll dive into kind of the laundry list of bands that have come from there in a minute, but I'm curious, like what were some venues you were going to? Because we know about Chain Reaction, Showcase obviously out in the IE, but like what were some other venues you were going to around that time?
so there was I went to a lot of church shows like that. That's a big one too. I went to a lot of those. There was a venue called The Alley. Do you remember that in Fullerton?
It sounds
Um,
vaguely familiar, but I don't think I ever went. Actually, no, I did. I saw Belay My Last there.
okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I remember that name. Went to The Alley a few times. Would go to Glass House. I mean, the main ones I was going to were Chain, Showcase, and Glass House for
Okay.
shows, and I'd get my friends, older neighbors, to drive out, you know, those places. Go down to Che Cafe in La Jolla, um, check that out. And then yeah, just house shows in South Orange County. Those were a big deal. We didn't really have like a venue, at least that I went to in South OC. And the only one that popped up was years later, and that was like it was like a dive bar where you had to be 21 to get into. So I mean,
Okay.
and then you hear about hardcore bands playing there, but um, where else did we go to? I mean, there was Pharaoh's Den in Riverside, I think it was.
Yeah, sounds about
North
right.
Carolina. Yeah, I remember seeing some bands out there. Um, yeah, just some DIY shows wherever they pop up. Green Turtle in Whittier.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I'm just trying to think of all of them off the top of my head right now. But I'd never went to Coos Cafe. That's somewhere I wish I could have gone, but I wasn't old enough. And well, I was at the time. I just never made my way out there. Uh,
Where was Coos Cafe?
that was in Santa Ana, so that would have been like
Okay.
pretty close to me, closer than going to Chain Reaction. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Where are you at right now?
I'm in Irvine right now.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
pretty central in terms of Orange County, right?
These days, yeah, but before I was down in Dana Point, which was about 30 minutes south of here, depending on traffic. So,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Man, that's such a cool like juxtaposition to think about. Like so you're saying you grew up in Dana Point, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and so you're in Dana Point discovering like this really heavy, aggressive music that probably would have scared most people in Dana Point, right?
Yeah. It was, I mean, it wasn't the typical music. I mean, a lot of my friends, that I went to school with, that they got into. I mean, at the time, it was kind of trendy in high school. I mean, I think Killswitch Engage was huge at the time. People loved Under Oath, those kind of bands.
Yeah.
And, um, but yeah, being down in that area, it wasn't really like, there was a few punk bands and stuff, but I mean, nothing on that level of heavy,
Mhm.
You- somehow trickled down our way.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, even and it's funny also because, like you said, a lot of church shows. I remember when my brother Ryan started taking me to shows. For whatever reason, churches were just like the willing venue. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Some reason they would let you play there, and then it was mostly secular heavy bands too. It wasn't always a Christian metalcore band. Sometimes it was, but um, I saw some really violent shows at churches actually. So thinking
Yeah,
about it,
yeah.
yeah,
What a trip.
yeah,
So, do you recall? I mean, we have to spend some time on Chain and Showcase. Like, do you recall your first time at either of those two venues?
yeah. So first time at Chain was for 18 Visions. I forget who they. This was Vanity era.
Okay.
They must have been playing with it was Mateau. Do you remember that band? They were actually from like Dana Point area. They used to dress up like pirates, and they had straight edge songs. And then yeah, so it was Mateau, or it might have been right before Vanity, but that was I know it was 18 Visions, and I know those bands were there. So um Mateau, X Stand X, these bands were from like the South County area, that they were a few years older than me, but their demos were being passed around, or you'd get their songs on hxcmp3.com, and
Yeah.
friends would pass things. I don't know how I got music in my hands, but I'd get CDs and then throw them on my computer or whatever it was, iTunes and stuff. So yeah, this, because I had the poster. The art was made by Derek Hess for this, because I tracked it down years ago. But it was X Mateau, and I think there was a band called Capsize that played, but I don't. I vaguely remember any of the other bands playing except for 18 Visions, because that's that was like the big one for me. Finally getting to see them.
Yeah.
Um, and then Showcase, it was 18 Visions, and I think it was Atreyu. Um,
Damn.
yeah, it was. I got grounded for that one for sure. Yeah, I would go out. I would jump in a car with some friends and tell my parents I was going to the movies, and I'd be out in Corona and like an hour away, and
Yeah.
getting home super late, and sometimes smelling like cigarettes, or
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
sneaking a Del Taco bag inside. So yeah,
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean because I mean, Well, luckily my mom was super lenient because I had Ryan as an older brother to like watch over me,
Mhm.
but I do remember one time my mom took me to my own, like took me alone to a show at Showcase, and she just waited outside while I was at the show.
Mhm.
And then the show ended and I came out, and then a fight just broke out, like a massive brawl in the middle of the parking lot. Like,
Oh, great. In front of
yeah,
me. Yeah.
exactly. And my mom was just like, get the fuck in the car. We're leaving. And my mom is a very calm person. It takes a lot for her to, really lose her shit. And she
Mhm.
was like furious of just like, what the fuck just happened? Why did I spend my night here? And this is what it amounted to. But secretly inside, I was like, man, that was crazy. I can't believe I just experienced that.
Yeah. Yeah. You got that cred now, and you're like,
Yep.
this is actually the greatest night of my life.
Straight up. And
Yeah.
I wish I remembered what show that was. I don't remember my first time at Showcase, but I do remember my first ever stage dive was during Dead to Fall at Showcase.
That's awesome. Was
Yeah.
that is that when they were I think I was at Showcase with the Dead to Fall show, but I think BT Band played.
Um I
Maybe
don't
you'd remember if
I
better.
don't know cuz I mean Ryan was with me at that one and
Yeah.
he at the time was pretty into BT Bam, so like it sounds like very plausible, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Cuz I was the one that was like a fucking nerd for Dead to Fall. I loved metalcore,
Yeah.
and he always loved a bit more progressive stuff. Um But yeah, I mean, that's the thing about Showcase though, right? Is like you just see do you know Gabe from Darasum?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's always posting flyers from Showcase shows and I'm like, dude, I thought I went to a lot of Showcase shows and then I see all these flyers and then I'm like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? There's so many shows there.
Yeah. There I mean, I remember seeing like the I don't know, like the little flyers that would get handed to you at shows, the ones that he now scans and uploads.
Yeah.
And you'd be walking out of a show and you'd see next month's calendar at Showcase, or you'd see like it pinned up somewhere at Tower Records or wherever you were at, sometimes in like a magazine too. But yeah, all the stuff that Gabe posts, it was like he was at every show ever.
Yeah. It's
And
fucking nuts.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, even Ryan, I think like there was lore about Showcase before I had ever even gone there because him and I think my our other brother was there with him. They saw Adamantium at Showcase,
Oh,
and I remember
mm,
him telling the story about a circle pit. Remember there was like a second level, like there was kind of
mhm.
that barrier. There was a circle pit that went all the way around that little
Around the
guardrail.
world. Oh,
Yeah, and I was just like, so as he's like getting me into heavy music, I'm like hearing this. And then so to finally go to Showcase for the first time was just a mind boggling experience.
yeah, this is where it happened, his story, and
Yeah.
I remember that too, being like hearing all the lore of before I'd even gone to a show and in hearing the violent things that happened, the over exaggerations, just straight up
Yeah.
lies from friends. Like, I heard somebody died at that show. Yeah, people die at shows, and I'm like, no, I mean, they have, but not these. And
Yeah. And it's not like a common occurrence where like, oh, you're just going to talk about it passively. You know what I mean?
right,
I
yeah,
mean, I think, although I will say, again, I saw that fight outside of Showcase, and then one of our super close friends, Hanaro, the first time we ever saw Suicide Silence, um, he got jumped by, I think, dudes in FSU, which
oh man,
maybe I'm making that up in my head that it was FSU related. Um, but he got jumped like badly, like face swollen. Like we were calling him Elephant Man after the show, and we were just so dumb we didn't take him to the hospital.
shit.
But yeah, so the Showcase lore is definitely like I think everyone who went to that venue has a story about it.
Yeah, especially with like all the crews. I sometimes it might have been FSU or it might have been Clobber Crew or some Courage Crew, something one of those crews. It could have been one of them, but I never knew. I was never like involved,
Yeah.
with that, and I never knew who was actually in a crew or not. I just knew
Yep.
there were some dudes who were just bigger, and I was always the little kid up until I started my own band and started actually getting like to know people. So,
Mhm.
but I would hear, I'm like, oh, so and so crew's here. I'm like, oh, should we do something? What do we do?
100%.
Just
Yeah.
stand here and watch the show and watch them. Like that was another thing too. I didn't feel like I was big enough to like go into a pit until I was probably like 16, 17. Like,
Yeah.
like before that, it scared the shit out of me. So,
Yeah.
you know, so
I always had a hall pass because I knew my big brother was there and his friends, and Ryan's 8 years older than me. So
yeah,
like I always felt like I moshed at a really young age because I was just like, no one's gonna fuck with me because I'm tiny. And well, actually I was a pretty big kid, but like I was still visibly a kid. You know what I
right,
mean? So I definitely got a hall pass a lot, but I remember that sensation of hearing about Courage Crew, hearing about FSU 24, and just being like, are they here? And are we going to get in a fight?
right.
You know?
People pointing, making up stories, and like, I never, yeah, it was one of those things. It was like, I don't know, like, I'm just here to watch the band,
Yep.
and then I'd find out years later, like, oh yeah, so and so was out in that crew. I'm like, oh, we've been friends. It never, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Never occurred to you that they were part of a hardcore crew.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So you said, did you say 18 Visions and Death Star was like your first like big show?
Uh, well, my first hardcore show, it was either 18 Visions at that chain show,
Okay.
with those other local bands I told you about, Mateau and X Stand X, and I think that might have been it, or the Bleeding Through one with Death Star.
Oh, Bleeding Through
Yeah.
and Death Star. Okay. Yeah.
I don't know why. Like my asked me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have been able to tell you everything, but I think COVID did something to my
Oh, yeah.
memory. So,
Dude, COVID cooked us all.
yeah,
2019 feels like yesterday to me still.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
given that some of this stuff is almost 25 years ago, and like I'm still not accepting that,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, yeah, this is weird. I'm talking about stuff that happened, like I was talking about something the other day with a friend. I'm like, remember when so and so like ate shit at the, skating this rail or whatever? And he was like, yeah, that was 20 years ago, like
God damn.
2005, man. And I was
Yep.
like, 2005 was 20 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
It
So,
is fucking bonkers. I mean, especially now, like, you know, talk about like all these legendary Orange County bands.
mhm.
Bleeding Through put out an album and I see them and I'm like, man, they're just grown ass adults, and like, I see Brandon and I'm like, man, Brandon's in his 40s, like all those dudes are, and it's just such a trip. I'm like, when did this happen?
Yeah. No, I mean, they were always older, like to us.
Mhm.
I mean, it was like, yeah, you guys are way older than me. But then now I'm like inching closer in age to some of these guys too. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, you're not so far off from me, even though you got like 8 or 9 years on me.
Yeah.
And you were doing this when you were like 18, 19, 20 years old too, when
Yep.
started doing it. And it's just cool that they still are doing it and
Yeah.
they still sound great. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Well, it's a
Yeah.
perfect segue into, yeah, kind of the Orange County, like, I mean, honestly, like the Orange County Hall of Fame. Like, there's just some heavy hitters that came from there, and
Yeah.
Bleeding Through being one of them. Do you, like, for you, what was it like being able to have such close access to those bands? Did you realize that they were special bands at the time?
I think it was just popular with friends in high school, just what friends were listening to. And it was like so and so would be wearing this shirt. And it was everybody was talking about going to the show. It was like, oh, we're going, we're gonna go see Throwdown. They're playing with Bayonet Chain, They just put out Haymaker. Um,
Damn.
and like we gotta go, like so and so got tickets, and it was back when like Ticketmaster was like in Macy's, and we had to like go into
Yeah.
the gift wrapping area and get tickets from there, or Tower Records, go wait in line. And like I just remember like um they were just big bands, like it was just because at that Bleeding Through show, I mean, there had to been like 500-600 people there, it felt like, at
Mhm.
that first one I really went to. And um Like it just seemed like that they were, you know, I didn't understand the whole band touring any of that stuff yet until I
Yeah.
actually like got a little older. But to me, it was always throw down 18 Visions bleeding through,
Yeah.
and in the area when I found out that was like, and then of course people were like, oh, well, Atreyu and Avenged are from down here too.
Mhm.
And then Seosin and, some of these other bands, but those three were the ones. I mean, I never really got fully into the other ones other than Seosin, but like the other three were the big ones for me growing up, and then finding out that Adamantium was kind of like their first band,
Yeah.
And then, I mean, but 18 was before. I think 18 Visions was before Adamantium, but I wasn't around for those days, so
Yeah.
yeah, just from
Do
what I
you
hear.
do you do you consider like until the ink runs out, that's the first 18 Visions one, right?
That's their. That's not the first one. The first one is there was the Lifeless EP, and then
Oh,
there
that's right.
was
Yeah.
Yesterday is Time Killed.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and then Until the Ink Runs Out.
Okay, because
Um,
when I hear that stuff, I'm like, man, 18 Visions, they have their, kind of like little niche, like cult following, but because their sound evolves so much, I think people forget that 18 Visions was really kind of doing metalcore before metalcore was a thing. But I'm curious, do you see it that same way?
um, I was thinking about it, and it was like I feel like, yeah, I think like when you look at the really metallic stuff, 18 Visions for sure was doing that, and then I think that because Adamantium and Throwdown leaned more on like a hardcore sound, and it was still
Yeah.
metallic, um, but like not like Until the Ink Runs Out. That
Yeah.
was even the records they did before that. They were just brutal, with the metal influence. So,
Mhm.
but that I mean that was my, to me that was like my metalcore intro.
Yeah.
Um, that record specifically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think until the ink runs out, and then This Is Love, This Is Murderous were probably two of the first metalcore albums that like Ryan was super into like Bridge Nine stuff at the time,
mm,
but also a lot of like metalcore was kind of starting to get popular around that time. And yeah, until the ink runs out, and yeah, This Is Love, This Is Love, This Is Murderous. Those were the two where I was like, oh, this is crazy. This sounds like just as aggressive, but it's also melodic, and there's even some singing, you
yeah,
know?
to me it was. I mean, I heard Portrait of the Goddess first, and it might have
Okay.
been whatever was burnt on CDs and given to me. And it's so funny too, because when iTunes came out,
Mhm.
and like you could see on like the first editions of iTunes, you could see your favorite bands and their albums, and I would discover that a band had another album I didn't know about because of the
Yeah.
CDs my friends are burning, or like um I'd go to the record store, but sometimes like Tower Records or Best Buy or whatever I was at didn't have the CD of that band, or
Mhm.
it was just because I mean, Trustkill, Indecision Records, all those labels that were putting those CDs out at the time, because I wasn't dealing with vinyl all yet, but it was um it was kind of like a rare thing if you saw them. And I would nerd out. I would be like, "Oh my God, there's a Adamantium CD, or there's a
Yeah.
Anti CD, or there's um, I didn't see that over at the other store, So but I realized that some of the CDs my friends would make for me, they would have, you know, 5 18 Vision songs, and they might have been on Until the Ink Runs Out, and then there'd be like two Poison the Well songs, a Bleeding Through song, an Etid song, Disembodied, whatever it was that was on that, and I would get this mix of just random music and listen to that over and over. And then when I saw iTunes and all these different songs I could preview, I was like, oh shit, I didn't know that was the CD had more. I didn't know that was, I understood the concept of records, but I didn't like, for some reason with like metalcore and hardcore, like when I saw I was missing out on like all these other songs, I got way more into it and had to know everything and have everything. And Napster, Kazaa, LimeWire, all those things helped too. So
Damn, dude, I forgot about Kazaa because yeah, Napster and LimeWire were big, but
yeah,
Kazaa was another one. Damn,
yeah. WinMX, Bearshare, Soulseek, had them all.
damn,
Yeah,
I love hearing that because
yeah,
yeah, I that was even for what I do now with Hardcore Dropout. I look back and I'm like, oh, there were early like seeds being planted or like early traces of what I currently do, and
mhm,
I remember just spending hours on was it Pure Volume?
yeah,
Yeah, when that started coming out, I would spend hours on Pure Volume trying to find bands. And then MySpace hit, and then it was like I was always just like a mega researcher. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And that's why,
Well, I can relate. Like,
yeah. Did you see the thumbs up?
yeah, what was that for?
Apple, if I give a thumbs up, Apple will do that sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, Apple agrees. It was a fun way
Cool.
to find music was to just spend hours on Pure Volume.
Yeah. No, I love doing that, and obviously the MySpace music, when you can click through all your favorite bands and their top eights, or like the record labels had
Yeah.
their stuff up, and you could read the bulletins and all that. So
Yeah. No, yeah, that's like, and again, that's what I do now is just like endless browsing, you
yeah,
know. So
yeah,
I'm selfishly so curious. You said you were into Seos, and was Thrice ever on your radar?
yeah, yeah. It was funny because I mean I liked so many different styles of music, and it was like just um hearing somebody would make me a playlist, a girlfriend or, whoever it was at the time, and there would be, the and it was funny too that all I come to find that all these bands were like friends with each other or shared practice spaces together. And Justin, who played guitar in Citizen, lived in my neighborhood growing up and went to the same skate shop as me. And so it was just small knit kind of world. And so Thrice did come on my radar, and it was because my friend Eugene, when we were in summer school back in freshman year, I think, he told me about them, and I think it was Artist in the Ambulance at the time, or maybe
Yeah.
um, what was the Identity one?
Yeah, Identity Crisis. Yep.
Identity Crisis. Okay, yeah, I think it was. He didn't burn those CDs for me, but he told me to write down the records to check out, and that was my introduction to them. So
Yeah, they were huge for me because I tell this story a lot, but like going to hardcore shows was obviously foundational to like my music story.
mhm,
But when I started hearing like hardcore adjacent stuff that had that melody and like but still had some sense of aggression, that's when it was like, holy shit, like I think you start discovering music little by little, but eventually you find the stuff that you feel like is yours, where you're like, oh, this is my shit.
yeah,
And Thrice was a big one for me.
yeah. Thrice was really cool. And yeah, they super catchy,
Hmm.
good songwriting, and then mentioning the Seosin thing, it was like bands that kind of fell in line with that, like at the drive-in, Glassjaw,
Yep.
um, those were big too for me. I love those. And who else did I like a lot from that kind of sound and ilk? I mean, I was obsessed with Glassjaw, like just still love them.
Yeah.
But when it started getting in, and I think people call it post-hardcore,
Yeah.
like that's the term they'll throw on it. I didn't go much further than those bands. Like I didn't go like people throw things on, and like we played a show at the Constellation Room in Orange County with 18 Visions in
Hmm.
December, and they were doing an emo night thing over in the other room, in the big room. And I was
Oh,
like,
wild.
yeah, it was. So I was hearing some of these songs, and I was like, I've heard this. Who is this? So I'm like Shazamming it because I was like, Siri, who's this band, whatever. And I was like, I never listened to Motion City Soundtrack or Chiodos or any of the stuff where I was watching people my age singing along to it, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Who is this?" You know, I was like, "This, I'm not into this. Who is this?" You know, and
But yeah, so that's, I mean, and that's also interesting right now because we have this kind of metalcore and hardcore revival, but honestly, I think that whole post-hardcore scene that you're talking about has kind of transcended itself into now this like emo revival of Chiodos, Hawthorne Heights, like even Panic at the Disco, like all these bands have just suddenly been clustered together into this like emo scene. So, but people our age, that was like post-hardcore stuff to us growing up.
well, I mean, like, how do I say this? Like, it sounds sexist, and it's just not. But it was like girlfriend music back in the day to me. Like, and I don't
Yeah.
mean it as any slight, because I mean it was some guys who performed on that are now my friends, but I'm like, and hey, more to you, you had all the girls at your shows, you know, and like where
Yeah.
I'm getting beaten up by middle-aged men, and and not looking, I'm not getting the attention of any girls, so I'm
Yeah.
like, but yeah, it was so to me that was always like, this stuff my girlfriend was listening to at the time, in high school or whatever. And then now it was like, it's funny because, I'm friends with the Sea Space Cowboy. Well, I hate saying kids because they're not kids, they're adults now. But
But to you,
when,
they're definitely kids.
well, when I met them, they were coming to my old band show, like those shows. And that's when I met them, when they were some of their their formative bands before that band. And they were looking at this new emo scene, like that, round of bands that you just mentioned, as their influences. Like, and they have that sound, I mean, I don't know if they're still going to go forward or anything, with what they're doing, but the most recent record I was hearing, the songs, I'm like, this sounds like that era. Like, it would have fit perfect in that era. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
No, yeah, that's again, like emo has just kind of become this umbrella term for any band that has high pitched singing and sings about, introspective like depression and breakups and all that. But
Feelings. Yeah.
yeah, literally just feelings and like, but to me, emo was exactly like what you're talking about, like the bands that CU Space Cowboy pulled influence from.
Right.
That that was a lot of emo to me growing up, and now it's just become massive.
Yeah. It's it's wild seeing the resurgence, and that there's like an actual emo night that sells out at a big venue, and it's just somebody there being a DJ.
Yeah, and people
Um,
go nuts.
yeah,
Yeah. Nostalgia is a powerful drug.
yeah. With all the 20-year anniversaries we've been dealing with the last few years of
Yep.
those big records and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah. I posted this the other day. I said, never believe a band when they say they're breaking up
yeah,
because eventually that 10-year reunion, that 15, that 20-year reunion is going to hit and the money's going to be too good for them to look away, you know?
yeah. I mean, I never thought I'd ever get to see Botch, and I know they got together for their own reasons. It didn't seem like they did it for the money, but
Yeah.
um,
I mean, a band like Botch, yeah, there's probably not much money to be found there.
I mean, they were killing it. I mean, they were selling out every show. It looked like that they were playing around the world when they did their just run of their most recent reunion tour.
Hmm.
But I had like I forget. There's a friend who always posts that same thing. No band has ever really broken up, and they were a band that was on my list that I always wanted to see. And they finally got back together, and it was everything I ever wanted. And I
Fuck
flew
yeah.
up and saw their first show back in Tacoma, and then I saw it again down in Orange County too with the 18D guys, and it was
Damn.
perfect. Yeah,
That's fucking amazing.
yeah.
So at what point in all of this kind of trajectory did you start playing music?
Um, so I mean, my friends and I, we'd start learning the lyrics, just to some of these records, and we'd be up in the front or, singing along, screaming along, doing whatever we could to trying to emulate whoever was on stage. And there was from one of the church shows, my friend Matt's band, who's gone on. I mean, he's no longer in the band, but he was the original singer of the band Phineas, and they're a solid state
No
band.
way.
And so they before they are before they became what they are now, they were kind of like a local band in my area, and we'd see him play church shows, and they had like a Norma Jean, Sky Came Falling kind of sound to them,
Okay.
and way more melodic, but some heavy parts. And we would we would go and see them, and I'd learn the lyrics, and Matt would just throw the mic at me, and I would do whatever. I didn't know it was coming out, but just kept doing that, and then
Yeah.
I felt like comfortable because my friends and I would be driving to shows or driving around listening to like Converge or something crazy and screaming along to it. And I had a friend that said, "You actually kind of sound good. Like
Yeah.
we sound like shit. You actually seem like you can do it, or you figured out how to do it." And so there was a show. That same band Phineas played with this other band called Miss Leota from Fountain Valley, and I'd heard their CD and I loved their tracks. They kind of reminded me of like Every Time I Die, a little bit like A Life Once Lost, like kind of just chaotic. They had like Dillinger's energy live
Okay.
almost, like not on that level, but they were all wireless, and they'd be running around the venue and jumping off stuff and getting hurt and throwing pool noodles and just being ridiculous,
Yeah.
around. And I knew like I guess I was one of the first people that was in the front and singing their words back to them, and they were like, "Dude, that's so sick. You actually sounded good. You want to do a song with us?" And so I did like a song with them, and kind of gave me the confidence to think I could actually sing in a band.
Hmm.
And then I sang like a show or two for Phineas when my friend Matt couldn't do a show. So
Fuck
I like
yeah.
filled in for them. I don't think I did very well at all. It was like a total nerve wracking experience. But
Yeah.
I would hop up on stage with them and Miss Leota all the time for like a year. And then I started jamming with some of my friends. And this was like my senior year of high school. So like I'd say like 2006, early 2007. And that's like when I started trying to be in bands and do my own thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Damn. That's
Yeah.
fucking awesome. Especially because, yeah, you made a potent point there that like a lot of people, especially in that era before there was like, really good vocal technique that you could just YouTube, like a lot of people would just scream as loud as they could and it would sound
Yeah.
like shit. But there was always people who we didn't know it at the time were figuring out how to scream properly. And it sounds like you were screaming well.
I don't know. I still like people ask me like, "What do you do? Like, how do you do that or whatever?" Like I don't know, man. Like I've heard techniques or people explain things because I've wanted to give a more thoughtful, response when people ask me like what I'm doing, and I've definitely got it down more musically now. Like I
Hmm.
understand notes and being in key and all that, and
Yeah.
vocal control too, and knowing what I need to do to get the most out of my voice. But back then it was yelling in the car or like
Yeah.
yelling at shows or whatever with my friends until
Hmm.
couldn't talk for a few days. And
Yeah.
yeah, just not knowing anything.
Yeah. Absolutely just shredding your vocal cords, but
Yeah.
you're still like, well, that was fucking cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Big
So
time.
so then being a vocalist has been like your main in all your bands, have you been a vocalist?
Yeah.
Okay. That's fucking sick. So then what was the first band that was like your band where it was your main thing was I'm in this band full time?
It was Seizures. That
Oh, no
was
way.
yeah.
Okay.
I was in some other other bands that I was doing where it was like I would get together with some friends, we'd practice, but we didn't have a name for it. And then
Mhm.
there was this other band that my friend Matt, the one who initially sang for Phineas, he
Mhm.
started another project after he left Phineas, called The Resurgent. And he had done like a demo with them, but he was like, I just don't have time to do Phineas or this band. So if you want to step in, you can. So I stepped into The Resurgent. We recorded some songs, we played some shows together, but it didn't really. I was going through some stuff at the time, and it just didn't feel like it was my band. It
Mhm.
felt like I was just stepping in, kind of like taking over Matt again, like I
Yeah.
did when I'd fill in for Phineas. And no slight against the guys I was playing with or anything, but I think they had just a different direction they wanted to do things with, and I just wasn't fully on board, with it. And I started Seizures with my, you know, close friends, that the ones that I was going to shows with and hanging out with and nerding out about music with, on a regular basis. So, and
Hell yeah.
they had done other bands. They were more like indie youth crew, and like some more like Suicide File, or like, more like Bridge Nine,
Mhm.
that vein of music. So um it was just like that was kind of their direction. As sorry, I had to just silence my phone.
No worries.
But yeah, so that they were kind of I came for the more metallic side. And at the time when Seizures was starting, I was listening to a lot of Cursed and Trap Them, and you know Disembodied had just gotten back together, and they're like an all-time favorite of mine. So I wanted something that was less metalcore,
Mhm.
like, I guess because the Resurgent was kind of more current metalcore at the time, and it was just like,
Okay.
I want something that I want to sound like, and so
Yeah.
we were channeling Cursed and Adamantium and Trap Them, and bands like that. So
Hell yeah. Yeah,
Breather.
because that's what I was gonna say is I, you know, truthfully not super familiar with Seizures, but I had heard enough of your guys' stuff that I remembered it as kind of like it's such a tough like subgenre of hardcore to define, but Trap Them I feel like from what I remember is a perfect comparison of like chaotic, loud, noisy, um, almost like in a way it's like crusty and violent, you know?
Yeah, we had changed our sound up. So like the first 2-3 years, we were definitely like a chaotic, like dark hardcore band, or I don't know what
Hmm.
you'd call it, just in that vein where it was just darker with some melodic parts. And then we just kind of, the guys got better at their instruments, and
Hmm.
Albert, who's best friend since 8th grade, was the lead guitarist and wrote everything for that band. So he got really in. We were listening to more Botch again at the time, and Dillinger, and kind of heading into that direction. And we just went full mathcore
Fuck
and
yeah.
full chaotic, and heavy atmospheric with like kind of tones of Neurosis and things
Damn.
like that. So, and then the last record we did was kind of more beachy.
Okay.
And we coined it beach math. So
Really?
yeah, so we were messing around, but that was the band I did that band for 10 years, from 2010 to 2020. And then we I like started a label. Since you're not familiar, I'll give you a little info. But like, I started a label in 2012 and put out a split with our band and this band Colombian Necktie. Do you remember them at all?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Juan now plays in that band Black Sheep Wall, and
Okay.
he was a guitarist in Colombian Necktie. And then he's been in a bunch of cool bands, but did that. And then we toured all over. We got to do some cool shows, just with bands I never thought I'd ever get to see or play with. We played the Nile a bunch.
Hell yeah.
We were on. I've played so. I've been the only one who's played every single Within These Walls fest. That's the only thing I'll
Wait.
brag about.
Wait. So
But
you mean like you're the only one out of all the bands and people that
yeah,
have played, you've played every single one?
yeah. Ever since,
Holy
yeah.
shit.
So I think the one we were at last year was 2024. Yeah. So I think it was the fourth one. But
Hmm.
from what I remember, they've only done three others, and it was 2011, 2012, and 2016 or 15. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it was
16.
definitely pre-pandemic.
Yeah. So, but I've just, Arizona was kind of like our second home, and we'd play the underground too, or we'd play 51 West, or whatever. I'm trying to think if we played anything else out there, but just the whole Arizona scene kind of became like a second home to us, and I've made
Yeah.
some friends that are out there, and just everyone over at the Mantooth team, and Rolly and Brian and Michelle and all
Yep.
those people, just so it was really cool to like go out there, and that was mostly with Seizures. It was our first time ever being there as DUHKHA back in September last year, but it was just Seizures got to go around and play a bunch of cool shows, and we toured with Zayo, we toured with Seosin when Anthony Green came back,
No
and
way.
then we played with Run with the Hunted, or we did like a tour with Run with the Hunted. That was like one of their final tours, but they're Phoenix, like Arizona hometown heroes. So
Yeah.
we did a bunch of stuff with Horse the Band. Yeah, we just kind of were doing a bunch of shit that whole decade that we were a
Damn.
band. And so pre-pandemic, well, no, it was probably a month or two into the pandemic. Things were just locked down, but that's when like Keith and Rolly and I we started DUHKHA, and then Seizures broke up during the pandemic, and it just that was like the end of that band, and
Okay, so
yeah,
Seizures was still together, and then DUHKHA, they overlapped.
they did, yeah, for only a
Okay.
few months, yeah.
Okay. So, and yeah, it's a perfect segue into DUHKHA because, man, I'm just gonna totally fanboy. Like, Ryan told me about you guys right before the most recent album. I'm sorry, I'm blanking the name. What was the album?
A Place You Can't Come Back From.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So shortly before A Place You Can't Come Back From came out is when Ryan put me on to you guys, and immediately I was just like, I was fucking hooked, So I'm so intrigued. Like, what were the origins of DUHKHA?
So Rolly, his actual name is Errol Ulug. He produces and he records like most of the bands, the heavy bands that come out of Orange County. And I think he's been doing it forever, but he was in he also let me back up. So I've known Rolly for almost 20 years now.
Damn.
He'd been in all these bands I'd seen at Showcase. He was in a band called Nuns with Guns that I was obsessed with. Love them. And then he's played in Graf Warlock, Dangers. I think his first band, I don't know if it was his actual first band, but it was the earliest one I can think of, was called Fallen Angel. They played at Showcase a bunch with Bleeding Through, and played at Hoagie Bar Michaels out in Orange County. That Hoagie Bar Michaels was another Orange County venue that was big for me. That's
Hell yeah.
okay. Answering a question that's probably 50 minutes old, but
Not at all.
Hoagie's
I love
was-
hearing it.
Okay. I've been a little sick this week, so memory's kind of coming back. Yeah, so Rolly's been around, seen him around forever, and he actually mastered the first Seizures LP that we recorded with Alex Estrada in 2010, and that's how I met Rolly. Actually,
Okay.
I'm like, and so I'd seen him around, but actually, formally meeting him. Oh, he was also in Force of Change.
No way.
With them. So yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, Rolly's had his hand in so many different bands.
I mean, that means I've seen Rolly play without even knowing it.
And then he's also filled in for a few bands, and then now his main band is Teeth. They're death metal. Yeah, so
Yeah. Teeth is fucking insane.
right, yeah. It's just it's so nuts.
Yeah.
So Rolly turns out to be the best. He's become like a dear friend, but he made ever since he mastered our record, the first Seizures LP, he did everything else. He recorded all the rest of the Seizures discography after that. And so I spent a lot of time in the studio, with him and becoming friends with him, and knowing we have a lot of the same mutual friends, and making music together. So we already had a tight relationship as it was. And then during the last Seizures record, I brought Keith Barney in to do guest vocals on a few of the songs, and he and Rolly hit it off. And Keith had been wanting to get into producing and doing his own recording on his own to put out some 18 Visions stuff. So, um, he'd ask Rolly some questions, and then he booked some sessions with Rolly just one on one to kind of learn some tricks and tips and stuff. And I think that just the chemistry was there with our personalities and our sense of humor, and just
Yeah.
our love of heavy music, was all there. And Keith sent me a text. It was like, I think it was like in April 2020 or even May, but he was like, "Hey, what if we started like a COVID band? You, me, and Rolly."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Dude, yeah."
Yeah, you can't say no to that.
Are you
Like,
kidding me? Yeah. So I was like, "Dude, yeah, let's do it." And so I started like a three-way group chat with the three of us, and we were all still staying kind of in our own personal, COVID bubbles with, not seeing anyone yet. But
mhm.
both Rolly and Keith started demoing out some songs, and we just started this email text thread, of demos and collecting different sounds of what we wanted to do. And I still have like the texts from that initial, I wanted to screenshot them because our jokes and just our puns and the things we go out were just so funny. I'm like, I've got to hang on to these because this is like the funniest and best way to start a band. So um, I'm also super sentimental, so I hold on to like everything. But um, so Keith was like, let's like make a Seizures, Teeth, 18 Visions baby,
Yeah.
and like just kind of have fun and mess around and just do our own thing. And then we also talked about how much we love Meshuggah, we love Cannibal Corpse, Dead Guy, bands like that.
Yeah.
So let's make something chaotic too. And then it just kind of all came out like that. And finally, I think it was like the week Seizures was breaking up was the first time we actually got together as a band, like the three of us, and we started working on a demo. And coincidentally, that band broke up at the same time, and then um, we just kept doing DUHKHA. But it was like, because lockdown was so weird at that time too, like during
Mhm.
like June, July 2020, it was like you kind of would get together with people. You kind of
Yeah.
would take steps back, like, I think I'm overstepping,
Yeah.
I don't know, like,
Yeah.
do you have a mask? Like, you just,
You would get a tickle in your throat after hanging out and think, "Oh, I
yeah,
fucked up." Like,
right. I wanted
yeah.
to get my whole family sick because I wanted to go see my friends,
Yep.
and then everybody was pretending they weren't seeing friends, and I don't know. So just, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it was very select few that I'd see people that I felt that were responsible friends that I would actually, see.
Yeah.
But it was like, um, it just took a while to get off the ground, and so then like it was like a year later that we released our demo of the 3 song like EP that we did. And then it was like, so we'd started June June 2020, and then we didn't play our first show until December 2021. So but
Damn. Wow.
yeah, and by that time when we released the 3 songs online, Alex, who plays drums and Teeth,
Mhm.
said to Rolly that he was interested if we needed a drummer. And I was like, Alex is the craziest drummer I've ever heard in my life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Get him, so and then we started demoing out some new songs during that time too before we even played a show. So we had a full set, of like 6
Yeah.
songs when we started playing. So
Fuck yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm just like, I just ate all that up because again, I'm a big fan and it's just so cool to
Oh man.
hear where the
Me too.
influences came from because it's really there's a lot of like revival stuff happening right now of like, younger kids playing stuff or styles from like 20 years ago, which is awesome. But then when I heard DUHKHA for the first time, I was like, dude, so refreshing in this current era.
Yeah.
And I thought of Meshuggah, and then another band I actually thought of was Ion Dissonance when I heard you guys.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like a lot of the weird rhythms, a lot of just like low end kind of chunky stuff, that's like a lot of the patterns are hard to follow,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
but to me that's so refreshing. And like, so was that, you said all that was conscious, right? You guys were throwing around all these bands that you kind of were pulling influences from.
Yeah. Coalesce was a big one too, with the
Mm,
odd
yeah.
time signatures. And but yeah, we were going for like the heaviness of Cannibal Corpse with like the odd like aggressive timing of like Meshuggah and Coalesce. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because they always say a life once lost. The like those albums, A Great Artist and The Hunter, or just Hunter, those
Yeah.
records, they're like, I remember people saying, "Oh, that's just Meshuggah," they're just. But I prefer, and I might get exiled, and people killing wanting to kill me for this, but I prefer A Life Once Lost to Meshuggah. Like,
Wow.
yeah, I'm fucked, but
Yeah, wild. I love like
and I
fucking
love
love
Meshuggah too.
yeah, I love both those bands, but
Mhm.
yeah, I'm just, dude, it's Meshuggah. Like,
I was like when people were getting into deathcore and like um I remember a lot of those like California metal fests happening, like A
hmm
Life Once Lost, like being the oddball on one of those fests that I
hmm
saw. They played to like some screen on top of them, and it looked like an acid trip that was like on top of them, and they uh they blew my mind, and people were just not into it, and I was eating all of it up. I was like,
yeah,
this is the sickest, heaviest, like these people don't even know what they're witnessing, like.
yep.
And they're Meshuggah and A Life Once Lost are totally different bands, but I love what those, specifically those two records I mentioned, like those
hmm
two records are perfect front to back, and I'll throw them on all the time. I still, 20 years later, but
Yeah,
I,
Hunter is one of my absolute favorites.
yeah, yeah, there's just, it's nuts, and how well it still holds up too.
hmm
But like that was a big influence on me with like the odd timing and stuff, just because Seizures was really chaotic and mathy, but like vocal placement, I always had a hard time with Seizures, and Albert helped me a lot with that band. And this was like the first time I was doing it really all on my own, with
Okay.
these guys. And Rolly and Keith trusted me, and like obviously have had their input, but like I channeled a lot of them. I channeled that band Architect, like
Yeah.
not Architects, but
Yeah.
Architect from Michigan. Huge influence. I like black market activity bands. Like
hmm
I love that label. Just the
Was that guy from the Red Chord?
yeah, the but he ran that label, but like the bands on that label, like Architect was on that label. Ed Gein, Abominable Iron Sloth, which is one of my all-time favorite bands too. But he had just these really like Gaza was on that band or on that label.
Yeah.
So like
Yep.
all these just really odd timed, but just it's just relentless, just pummeling
hmm
heaviness, behind them, but not like deathcore at the time.
Yeah.
It was almost like just a more raw, like found in the basement,
hmm
metalcore. Like I
Yeah.
don't know how to explain it, but
Well, and I think that's now that you're saying that out loud, I feel like that's
yeah,
probably what I like about DUHKHA so much is like it still feels very raw. It feels like it could have came out in the 2000s, but it is not just a rip of like some album from the 2000s. It sounds like a lot of different albums.
cool.
Yeah. It's
I
what
hope
would
so. Yeah,
if you got I mean, I personally love using genres just for hardcore dropout to describe stuff to people.
yeah,
But I know at the end of the day, genres kind of don't really mean a whole lot.
yeah.
But I'm curious if you had to tell someone who was getting into DUHKHA what you guys were, where would you guys fall?
I like it changes up all the time because there's a lot of metal behind it. Like I feel like, but there is still I feel like metalcore would probably be the best,
Yeah.
descriptor. Um, but when you're in the band, you think of like, well, we're really noisy and we're like, you know, more chaotic than typical metalcore, like,
Yeah.
but we're not quite mathcore. And
Mhm.
so I don't know, genres always kind of elude me with this band because
Yeah.
yeah,
Which
it's
is, I mean, dude, that's like the highest form of compliment is like if your band can't be put into a genre, I think that's so fucking cool.
yeah, no, it's difficult when explaining it because I'm like, oh yeah, you haven't heard of this band, or
Yeah.
we sound like them,
Hmm.
Um, uh, and then with my singing, sometimes I want to go full death metal,
Hmm.
and so I'm like, okay, like I try to hover in the death metal core,
Yeah. I like that death
death
metal core. Yeah.
metal core. I don't
That's
know
good. Are
because there's
there, were there any vocalists that you channel like where you're like, oh, I love the sound of X person?
um Keith.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
I
That's
mean,
so
like,
funny.
I just growing up. I mean, it's funny because trying to I'll say Keith because I've always liked his
Wait,
vocals a lot. But
sorry to interrupt, but
Mhm.
man, Keith has been in so many bands. I obviously saw him at Within These Walls sing in Beyond Repair, but what Orange County bands was he singing in as compared to playing guitar?
He was in another band called Monument to Thieves,
Okay.
and that was later. That was, I think, around like 2000. Well, I was at their first show at Chain, and he was on guitar for that
Okay.
show, and it had Dave Richardson. He was on vocals, and he was the singer of In Reply and As Hope Dies. Do you remember As Hope Dies?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, he was the singer Monument to Thieves, and then he left and Keith took over vocal duties around 2010.
Okay.
Um, but don't know if there's been like demos. There's like a demo out there where it was called Rain, and
Okay.
Keith and Ken Floyd from 18 Visions, they did like 3 songs, and I don't think they ever played a show though. I would have been there, but or I wouldn't have. I don't know. I might have missed it, but um, yeah, I think those are the only ones, and I know for sure Adamant. I mean, he played guitar in Adamantium.
Hmm.
Um, if I can name all the Keith bands, I probably can, but yeah, he's just kind of had his hand in a lot of things that came out from that era.
Yeah.
Um,
But you had heard enough of his screaming throughout, throughout the course of your time in heavy music that you were like, Keith is a sound I like.
these days, I haven't. I've kind of like accepted like it's such a weird thing. Like I don't really pull an influence anymore.
Hmm.
Like when I was younger, I was like James Hart, Brandon, Keith, Dave Peter, all these different guys. I want to sound like Aaron from Disembodied. I wanted to sound like um, Mike from Martyr AD. I wanted to sound
Fuck
like all
yeah.
these different people. Um, in Flames, like that era, Jester Race,
Yeah.
Clayman, Colony, those records were big for me when I was younger. So I feel like I pulled from all of those. Just
Hmm.
but like if you listen and bleeding through like Brandon and like the Portrait of a Goddess songs, or even James and the Until the Ink Runs Out, like those guys were holding their vocals out a lot longer too.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was like a thing you had to do, and I didn't know how to do that without passing out. Or, I mean, I think I only passed out like twice in my life from singing, actually.
Holy
But
shit.
luckily it wasn't on stage. But I always just thought that was like a thing you got to do. It's like hold it out, and then like I figured out how to do it. And, um, so I don't know, going off on a totally different rambling whatever that I've been doing lately in this whole entire thing. But
That's what we're here for. No, I love all this.
Yeah, I'm like I don't know if you want me to reel it back in, but yeah, I would channel all those guys. I thought they were all sick, and um yeah, I mean it now it's more about my own, like I know what my voice is and I know what it sounds like, but I'm learning how to get more out of it as time goes on, and I'm like I grew up skateboarding, and so like I mentioned, but like um I still skate, but when I skateboard now, I'm not just throwing myself down things. I'm not just like flipping my board off into, I have more like a methodical kind of, I'm more conscious of my, how I'm doing it, my technique. And so
Yeah.
now with my vocals, I'm like, oh, can I get that deeper sound out? Like, can I get like a higher, how high can I actually go? And I've just tried different things out, just unlocking them usually in the studio or at practice and being like, oh fuck. And Keith looking over, he's like, how did you go so like gnarly? Or I didn't know I could do that, or so I don't know. Like now it's just more, not so much, I can't really pinpoint who my main influence is these days, but it's all of those bands. Like I love all of them in some way. Chris Chris Colohan, Cursed,
Hmm.
Left for Dead, The Swarm, like those bands he did were really big on me, and just kind of the way he could distort his voice, but it wasn't so far off from like a singing voice.
Hmm.
He wasn't really screaming, but it was this like really like just rough like vocal. So
Hmm.
I always
It's
liked that.
very like it's very like gravelly
Yeah,
almost, like
yeah.
gritty. Yeah.
So I always loved that. Yeah, just so many different people.
I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah,
Yeah, and you mentioned, holding it out longer, and that's actually something I've noticed for DUHKHA is like a lot of your patterns are kind of like slower, longer rather than really fast, snappy patterns.
yeah. Because I was always like, could I do like a hardcore band where I'm like shouting, like where it's just kind of like it's a powerful vocal, but it's more of like a shout, um, opposed or like a yell opposed to a scream. And I've like tried it. I've like been on some friends' songs where I try that, and it just doesn't feel right. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, I'm just gonna stick in the more. I feel like I've always had more of like a metal vocal,
Hmm.
So I just kind of I'm gonna stay over here where I know I get good results, so
Yeah.
or feel comfortable at. But who
Yeah.
knows? I'm
I think it sounds fucking awesome. I think you're doing great.
Thank you.
Yeah, of
Appreciate
course,
you.
man.
Thank you, dude.
Speaking of vocals, you have both James Hart and Trevor Friedrich on the album, right?
Yeah,
Hmm. And is
he,
Trevor does vocals on that track, right?
he does. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're in
that's
the
fucking awesome.
background. Um, and I don't. I mean, I hear them perfectly. Maybe it's because I was in the studio, but I know that we had them a certain way, and maybe we were in so much of the same key that some people are like, "What is Trevor doing on that song?" But he's backing me up during like the chorus part for when
Okay.
he's
Yeah.
working this. Yeah,
Yeah, I feel like I've heard him clearly, but also I've listened to that album a lot. So
okay,
maybe
cool.
it's just by law of averages, eventually it's gonna show up.
Yeah,
But so and James is on what, like track 3 or something, right?
on Arrows
That's
track
right.
2. Yeah,
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Is that just a natural occurrence just because of the history between Keith and all them?
I mean, they've become, close friends of mine. I go on tour with 18V, and I'm just always around those guys, but
Hmm.
I still, they're big influences on me, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this album in particular was really personal to me, and I wanted people that, were big players in my life, like influences, or like Trevor's been a close friend to me and has been there for me through some hard stuff. Same with James, Rolly and Keith, So it was
Hmm.
like um, having them all together on one album made a lot of sense when I was writing about some of these like really personal things, and it was kind of like a casting a movie almost like it's like, well, you were in, you were there, so
Yeah, 100%.
if you want, if you're, it was always this kind of like, would love for you to be on a track. Are you down? No worries if not, for Trevor, he sang in a few bands. He's always known as a drummer, but he's done vocal duties in a few bands now, and I love his raw vocals on those projects. And so I was like, you got to be on it. We've been talking about it for years. I've gone on stage and sang with your band. You got to come and do it with mine now. So that was fun to have him in there. And then just if he told high school me that James was going to be singing my lyrics, that I would even have lyrics one day,
Yeah.
just blowing my mind. So
Yeah, it's fucking wild.
yeah,
I can't even imagine what that feels like.
yeah,
Like for me, that would be probably Spencer Chamberlain from Under Oath. Like if I ever, that was one of the first like vocalists who I heard, and I was like, shit, whatever that is, that like I want to sing like that. And I have no vocal skills, but like still, he's one of my favorite vocalists, and so I can only imagine how special that feels.
yeah. And it's funny too, because I mean, when I was a kid and I was probably punishing them, after shows and
Yep.
just annoying them or online with, messages and stuff back in MySpace days. Like I don't know, it's they're my friend now, like
Hmm.
they're they're just, people I hang out with now, and that they hear about my day to day and, all that. So it's
Yeah.
like it's not so like, I guess like what I'm trying to say is it's like it's not like stepping in the studio with like someone and being completely nervous. It feels really comfortable, but like there's this shock, after it's done. I'm hearing it back and I'm thinking back, when I was young and going through some stuff and listening to 18V or Throwdown or whatever it was, and that was like my music escape, and I'm
Yeah.
like, now we're doing it together. What the hell? This is
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah,
Absolutely wild.
yeah.
So you mentioned this album was super personal. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's the title itself. I mean, um, I wrote from a place of trauma, like
Hmm.
just having gone through several different traumatic events, and kind of like how after each one, it was just like, wow, okay, I'm never going to be the same after this.
Yeah.
These are huge, life changing moments. Um, and I'm ultimately in a place I can't come back from, almost where it's this, like I've gone so far, like I'm never going to be that green again, or
Yeah.
whatever, or I'm desensitized now to certain things because of this thing. And so each track kind of has is a personal moment from my life, for a way I think, or just perspective, and it all kind of follows thematically. And I wouldn't say it's a concept record, like,
Hmm.
but it kind of is. I don't know how because I didn't have it in mind. I didn't lay it out when we were writing to make it that. It just all kind
Yeah.
of came out, and I was like, whoa, this all forms together as one thing. This is really cool. So
Yeah.
that's where all that comes from. And uh, with the last track, getting some catharsis out of it, and um, yeah, it works together with a meditation piece in the middle too. So
Yeah. Yeah, that middle track is great. Like it's such a nice pause in the album.
mhm,
So
yeah.
was this your first, like, as compared to Seizures, was this your first time going that personal for your lyrics?
No, I've actually written about some of those instances in Seizures. I just think it was from it was from a more mature point of view, and then also Albert being like the main songwriter of Seizures, he would always have like a main hand in writing a lot of the lyrics too. But
Okay.
we would co-write songs together, or I would bring him a draft of like what I did. And sometimes the music in Seizures, if you go back and listen to it, it's just sounds like someone threw a guitar down the stairs and there's car alarms going off in the background and it just gets crazy. So for me, it's it's so chaotic sometimes. When we were writing it, we didn't have like proper demo software, and I wouldn't know how the drums were going until like the night before. Sometimes we'd record something like,
Shit.
or we'd
Wow.
rewrite stuff in the studio, and it just in the beginning stages when we had more of like a kind of darker punk hardcore sound with the cursed trap them influence. And some of our stuff was still in 4/4. I was able to write to it, and I have some songs of my own on the first record and the split, and even our second record, which is my favorite one. But Albert always had like a final touch in it, and would just so it would thematically kind of form together, and I was okay with it. I was handling all the other duties of booking and running the merch and doing all the other things and then singing. And I with DUHKHA, it was like it was just kind of like, okay, Keith and Rolly aren't giving me notes,
Yeah.
they're also not trying to step in and write anything either. They're like, do whatever you want, we like your lyrics,
Yeah.
in the first EP, so they trusted me with it. And so to me, it's like my first time like actually creating something completely like a full piece of a body of work,
Yeah.
all my themes, no input really, other than a few like, oh, I think it'd be cool if you phrased it like this instead, or
Yeah.
like singing it in this, in this cadence or something, but we love the lyrics, and that was like big confidence boost for me, because having done this for so long with the other band and then stepping in and doing a full length, it was like a big project to take on. So especially for a band like this with such chaotic timing and
Yeah.
such. So yeah, no, I definitely, I mean, I love movies and world building, so it's just I created a universe with this record, and there's layers of meanings all woven within, and I kind of nerd out about that stuff. So it was really fun to like sit down, and for me, I'm like a big mental health advocate, so it's like to reprocess traumatic events or hard times you've gone through into something that's creative, and then when you can make it into like a cool song, it's the ultimate like release and
Yeah.
a big part of healing and moving past those events.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, and being able to get up there and sing and not think about that event, but you're like saying the words from it, it's cool. So
It's catharsis.
totally.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it didn't stop at just the lyrics for you though, because you did the artwork as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
You have to walk us through that, because that, if I remember correctly, is a pretty involved process how you did it.
yeah, I went through, so I loved like that band Car Bomb.
Mm-hmm.
They use, people say fractal art or like weird images and stuff, but to me it was this overall like, just I wanted to make something that was chaotic, but also something that was, when you look at the cover, you're like, you don't really know what this thing sounds like.
Yeah.
And so I messed around with construction paper and scanners, and then I worked on just kind of layering with glue, just glue gun, or not glue gun, glue sticks. And I made like a collage of stuff, and I'd take a picture of it, and then I'd put it in the computer, and then I'd alter it and just manipulate it with all different effects, like adjusting like the gamma, the weird effects that you can do in some of these programs, and
Yeah.
totally cook it at some points. And so,
Yeah.
but like not randomly, it was more of like I can drag this a little, make it a little crazier. And ultimately it came out into this, there was a few different versions of it that I sent to the guys, and and some of it was more complicated or even darker, but Rolly really liked the color scheme like I went with, and initially it was something completely different. It had more of like a Nine Inch Nails digital looking kind of look to it, and
Okay.
feel, but um, I'm just really happy with the way it came out. It just like seeing it actually tangible vinyl, and then messing around with the front and the back of it was like just really cool to see it all come together. And
Yeah, I can't even I mean I can't imagine. I've done, several projects in my life and brought them to life, and have
yeah,
made physical products and stuff. But like as a music fan, that must feel unreal being able to hold your own vinyl in your hand that has your artwork on it too.
yeah, and I mean I did all the artwork for Seizures also, like those all
Okay.
those records that we did. Except for the splits we did, I collaborated with one guy, and then we had the singer of Wormrot, a riff draw one for us back in the day.
Okay.
But I had done the art for those, and it just wasn't. Some of it was just photography, others was just graphic design, and pulling
Hmm.
from other pieces and manipulating digital media, So
Yeah.
this to be so hands-on, I was already making weird art and kind of patterns just on my own years before this that were kind of in vein with the DUHKHA art.
Okay.
So taking some of the weird stuff I would do before, kind of abstract, some of the abstract art I'd make like with construction paper and such, like
Hmm.
doing that and putting it into the computer and then making kind of just digitally manipulating it and then having it be like a tangible piece of art. Sorry, hold on. LaCroix are awesome.
Oh, dude, they're the best. What
Yeah,
flavor is that?
this is a peach pear.
Oh, all day. Love peach pear.
So, a side note, I crushed like, um, and I'll probably need help for this, but I crushed like two 12 packs, like 24 cans a week.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and it's just while I'm working or, after skateboarding, whatever, watching movies. But so I've been good lately though. I've been down to like 12 a week. So
Is that what fueled the artwork for DUHKHA?
I'd say it was like a big part for sure.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I got kind of full creative control from the guys to throw it together, and then um, even with Good Fight, they were stoked that I wanted to take a shot at it. And I know that like with production costs, it saves them, to pay an artist.
True. Yeah.
But it was like, I've always loved making my own art, and I designed all the merch for the old band, and just kind of picked it up as a necessity to kind of make my own stuff. And so yeah, it was just a natural thing I would try to do it. And Keith, he designs and does all that for a living,
Hmm.
wanted me to take full reign. So
Fuck
that
yeah.
was a cool nod that he trusted me with it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned Good Fight. How did that come about? Because that's Carl from Ferret, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Carl and Rick um, from Ferret. And so, which was crazy too. I mean, I'd been friends with Rick Barnhart of Good Fight and Ferret, online friends for years, and we chatted here and there, and they had an interest in Seizures at one point, and our friends Old Wounds and some of these other bands were starting to work with Good Fight,
Oh
and
yeah.
um, Seizures remained purely DIY pretty much the whole time we were together. Except for we did get signed to 6131 at one point.
Okay.
And but we never released anything with them. And the guy who was managing the label at the time told me explicitly, said, just because you signed doesn't mean that you're signed until you release something. So I guess we
Weird.
were signed. But I love Joey from 6131. He's cool. But yeah, it was just the way that label worked out. They had Culture Abuse and Julian Baker at the same time, and Julian Baker blew up to what she is now,
Yeah.
and they changed kind of their structure. But so Good Fight was really the first time I'd ever worked with a label, and Rick had always wanted to work with me in some capacity, and I was like, like I don't know, like we're not a touring, I've never been a full-time touring guy. So
Yeah.
I would always feel bad if like I let someone else put their funding into my project and I didn't deliver, on sales or something. So,
Hmm.
um, and I figured out a way to just do it DIY previously. And then Keith and Rolly actually mentioned they thought doing the DUHKHA stuff DIY would be the way to go. Um, or that we probably self-fund it if we wanted to, because that's what 18 Visions started to do.
Hmm.
Um, but there are so many of my friends that I've met over the years that wanted to work with us. So Michael from Escapist Records, he ended up putting out our 7-inch that came out before the full length, and I talked to him for years about doing something, and so that was cool to finally do something with him. And then same with Rick. It was like Rick was like, "We're interested. We want to put it out." They'd already worked with Keith with 18 Visions stuff, so on reissuing the 18 Visions records. They did it until the ink runs out reissue on Good Fight pre-pandemic. So they already
Okay.
had like, and they'd known each other for years. And so yeah, finally ran into Rick when I was on tour with the 18 Visions guys in Pennsylvania. And we talked about it, and I told him we were working on the record, and he said to submit it once it was ready. And I sent it over to him, and he was like, "I got the green light from Carl. Let's go." And um,
Damn.
and I still haven't really talked to Carl, but like respect what him and Rick did over at Ferret and Good Fight all these years, and
Yeah.
it's like an honor to be a part of that roster with those bands. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the coolest. I mean, I think I've mentioned all my favorites already on here, that Ferret worked with over the years. And
Yeah.
same with Good Fight with the, Disembodied, Martyr, Sky Came Falling, Life Was Lost,
Yep.
ETID. Being in company with all those, great
Yeah.
bands is just so sick. And they they've been so cool. I mean, like we want to play, we want to do more with this band, and we want to like push, like and play as much as we can and sell that record for them. So I
Yeah.
mean, like, but they've been so cool with whatever we've wanted to do this whole time, and it's been so fun working with them.
That's
And
fucking awesome.
yeah, so
So I've always been curious, like, what does that look like pushing a record when you're on a label, but it's still a small label and it's DIY? Like, do you guys have plans to tour, and is that how you would get it out there, or is it just doing more promotional stuff, or how do you approach that?
so I because I knew that touring full time just I like I think just mentioning it before, like I never really saw myself playing in bands. I've always loved bands, but like once
Hmm.
I started playing in one, it wasn't like it's never been my childhood dream to go out and be in a touring band.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a professional skateboarder, so
Yep.
I mean there was a touring aspect to that career choice too, but you know, once I got in the van and I started doing it, and the reality of it being like it's not that people don't like this music, there's just too much of this music. Like
Yeah.
at the time I was trying to really go and fully tour. So it's like there's just too many bands now. And
Hmm.
which is a cool thing cuz they're always keeping the light on at those venues all over the
Yeah.
place, and there's always a show you can go to now which rolls. So um but I was like, if anything, let's play it safe with low quantities of vinyl that I'm making, with the pressing plant, and kind of just asking questions along the way. What with the old band, it was like
Hmm.
I asked Jake Bannon at it was Revelation Records 25-year anniversary show back in like 2011 or 12, and Quicksand was playing for the first time since they had broken up, and I I was like I had to be there, and then um Kiss It Goodbye was playing too. So it was like these two big bands that I love that were on Rev. I had to go to that show, and I just happened to see Jake there, and I'd talked to him online a few times, and asked him some questions about pressing records since he owns and
Oh, wow.
Death Wish, you know. So it was um, like, what do you suggest for me, you know, who's trying to do this 7 inch with my friends, and what do you think the best plan of action is? Do you know someplace I can get deals or like whatever it
Yeah.
is? And he was so cool and sat with me for like 45 minutes right before
Damn.
Sensefield played. And he laid out like a plan with me and like
Wow.
kind of just told, and it was like, I didn't have notes, but I was taking mental notes, you know, and it was just this like, you know, no, there's no deals to be given out like these pressing plants, you know, like if you're
Yeah.
in this, you're in this, you're going to do it and you're probably going to pay everything up front too until you
Hmm.
establish credit with one of these companies and you get on a payment plan that way. But if you're a first time business, they'll want all your money up front and you should probably do low quantities and try and do DIY artwork if you can, you know, where you go to Kinko's and Xerox your own stuff and
Yeah.
you know, do all that and put, you know, save some money and put some aside and make sure that, you know, like you're willing to lose money on this too, because you're going
Yeah.
to lose money until you know, for a while until you don't. So, if depending on how your business model is, but I don't think we ever profited. Like, I don't think my label, it was more like a thing where I wanted to like put the South Orange County music scene at the time on the map with
Yeah.
the hardcore bands, the whatever Seizures was, and some of the shoegaze bands, you know, that were
Hmm.
playing, and kind of like represent a scene with my label and only work with bands that were playing in that scene. Like I thought it would be like a cool collective thing to do, and um, I the last Seizures record I put out was probably the most structured release I ever did, and I worked with Justin Pearson from The
The
Locust and
Locust. Yeah.
31G. He did the PR for everything, and I hired him to do it. And he was awesome and crushed it for us and got us a lot of exposure. And then just because I always heard it was like hire somebody to do PR, make sure you got everything lined up with the pressing plant, get your shipping station set up, and you can just run a label that way if you wanted to.
Damn.
And
That
that's
is so sick.
yeah, so that was what I did, you know, and it was awesome. Like that was my favorite release to work on, and it was that's kind of like what you would do. And then we booked a tour, and then COVID hit, and then we never went on it.
Fuck.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Man, COVID fucked a lot of bands.
yeah, yeah, and luckily I wasn't. And luckily, none of us were banking on that band full time. You know, like we
Hmm.
weren't expecting anything financially really from it. We were just at that point. I think we accepted like we've all got our main thing. It's fun to go out here and there, but
Hmm.
it's it's not going to be, you know, what makes us money. We're just doing it for the love of it. And same with DUHKHA. You know, I mean, I think like we're kind of in that spot too, where we've all got our careers, but if we can do weekenders and
Yeah.
flying updates and stuff, like we'll do it. So that's just to reel it back in. Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. Do you guys have anything planned for DUHKHA?
We're just booking some local stuff right now. We've just really been
Okay.
trying to play a bunch. So Rolly and Alex stepped out of the band. They're not playing with us anymore.
Okay.
They're focused on Teeth and that band Zampontly with Brian from Zabalba, that indigenous just gnarly death metal band.
Hmm.
Um,
So they're playing in that.
both of them play in that band, and then
Fuck
both
yeah.
of them play in Teeth, and then Rolly's running his studio full time. And
Okay.
so we had a lineup switch where Keith and I brought in our friend Ricky, who's played in a band called Blistering Joy, and then
Okay.
another band called Pigeon Wing back in the day. And then he's played in a few different bands, but he's always been really talented. He plays both drums, bass, and guitar, so
Damn.
he's just uh, really talented. And then now Matt Horowitz, who plays in 18 Visions and Adamantium, is playing drums with us now. So
Okay. Sick.
yeah, So I'm stoked because I mean, I love, like I said, Adamantium.
Yeah.
Huge foundational band for me. So
Yeah. That's fucking awesome.
yeah.
Well, that's actually a perfect segue into, the question I had sent you before we jumped on.
Mhm.
I'm so curious to know, what are your 5 essential metalcore albums from Orange County
Okay, so
or hardcore?
yeah, no, so I thought about this just because like initially right when you asked that I was like, oh, ding ding ding, I knew every
Yeah.
single one. It was like cool, I know exactly what I'm gonna say, but um and there's no like real actual order to this,
Hmm.
with the exception of like Adamantium from the depths of depression probably being the most important to me because it was like the thing that got me obsessed with hardcore heavy music.
Yeah.
Um, Before that, I had Slayer from Skate Videos, which was amazing, and Dystopia and other crazy bands from Skate Videos, but not
Yeah.
really following them. But Adamantium was like the first full heavy CD I had.
Hmm.
And I didn't have a burnt one, I had the actual CD. So that was a big one. So that would be the first one. Until the Ink Runs Out, 18 Visions, Beyond Repair, Throwdown, Portrait of a Goddess, Bleeding Through, and then In Your Blood, Excessive Force.
Fuck yes.
I feel like those bands wouldn't exist without Excessive Force. And
Hmm.
from what I've heard from the guys in 18V, um, I feel like that band was like a like the first like Orange County maybe metalcore band. Like, and I'll call them
Okay.
metalcore because I don't know if are you familiar with Excessive Force?
No, not at
Mountains
all.
and
And what
stuff.
did you say the album name was? Because I'm gonna look it
Yeah,
up real quick
it's
so I don't forget.
in your blood.
Okay.
And so that that record with it's got metallic riffs in there and leads. I feel like it's a metallic hardcore record. Even though it's more hardcore, but
Hmm.
I feel like that was one of the first ones from Orange County, but I know that those guys were heavily influenced by all the Victory Records bands at the time, and then
Hell yeah.
obviously Unbroken in San Diego. And
Yeah.
so I know that they were heavily influenced by a bunch of those different sounds coming around. And I know just from the conversations we've had, what got them into what, and, getting a Vision of Disorder mixtape or hearing some of these bands, that form their sound. But I feel like for Orange County Essentials, those 5 would probably be my picks.
Fuck yeah. No, I mean
Yeah.
those are immaculate, especially when we're
Yeah.
talking about impact they had and like how well they've held up, just when you think about how far ahead of their time some of those albums were,
Yeah.
where metalcore wasn't, there were definitely other bands starting to play that metallic hardcore type style, but no one, I don't think, was calling it metalcore yet,
Yeah, I don't
you know?
know. Yeah, I mean, metalcore, like, I even don't even remember hearing the term metalcore until I was like in high school, like in
Yeah.
2002, 3. So I mean, it wasn't far off from when I first heard those other bands, but it didn't become a regular part of my vocabulary
Yeah.
until I was a freshman or sophomore. So,
Yeah.
but even though those were like my essentials, I'd have to say like I prefer like You Don't Have to Be Blood to Be Family is my favorite Throwdown record, but I feel
Hmm.
like Beyond Repair is so essential to like it's like I'm taking you on a tour of Orange County hardcore. Like you got to
Yeah.
go these first 5 and tell me what you think.
100%. I
Yeah.
love that. And real quick, I want to touch on Bleeding Through, because have you listened to their most recent album?
I haven't checked it out all the way through. I've heard some of the singles.
Hmm.
Um, Brian Lepke, he was at our show this last weekend.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so I haven't checked out the full record all the way through yet. What do you
Yeah.
think of it?
Dude, okay, it's so hard to tell if it's hyperbole and I'm just like, "Oh, Bleeding Through is back. This is sick."
Mhm.
I think it's their best one.
Cool.
Like, And of course, the first two have they have like the original nostalgia factor of just not nostalgia, but like the foundational factor of like this is true bleeding through,
Yeah,
But just as far as like everything they've done since those first two, I'm like, oh my God, this is like it feels like the culmination of everything they've done.
that's so cool.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it's like I've been friends with all these bands, like
Hmm.
from, like I said, punishing them when I was a kid, or just being a
Yeah.
nerd, wanting to know things and asking them, questions, and somehow I end up at Del Taco or
Yeah.
Lucille's or something with them. And um, but Brandon, I owe a lot to Brandon for the way I sing.
Yeah.
He, like in 2011, he was hanging out and with a bunch of those dudes from the other side, like the 18 throwdown guys, and
Hmm.
he opened his gym, and I started training at his gym before he actually had his gym, the actual building yet. And
Yeah.
they played a throwback set at Chain, and I'd been acquaintances with him up into that point, but he threw me the mic during Savior Saint Salvation, and
Fuck.
that was like a crazy thing for me. And I was like, dude, how do you keep your stamina? Like, how are you able to be on like that gnarly with all that energy from beginning to end of the set? And he's
Yeah.
like, you got to come train with me. So I started training with Brandon, and I trained with him for like 2 years at that gym. Um, and then he had me doing backup guest vocals on that record of theirs, The Great Fire. So being
Damn.
being
Holy
on that
shit.
record, like that was so cool to be a part of, and getting to know the guys, like Derek and
Hmm.
Ryan and Brian and Scott and like all those people. Well, Scott had already left the band before them, but like I've somehow become friends with all these guys, just being a fan of their music all these years. So
Yeah.
it's really cool to see these bands all still going, like,
Hmm.
and I think they just played a sellout. I mean, like it's 18 Visions playing, House of Blues to a huge ass crowd, and same with Bleeding Through, and this is
Yeah.
all in 2024, and um, people still love that music, and
Yeah.
they're still stoked to come see it. And these guys are probably in better shape now than they were when they were making some of those earlier records. I mean,
Hmm.
I know James for sure just jacked and gnarly. James like
Yeah.
not sick, and just yeah, they're just no, it's so cool to see them do this, and I think the vocals sound way better now too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, yeah. And that's, yeah, talking about Brandon, like my first impression when I heard the first single and then it holds up all the way through the album is like he sounds so fucking vicious on this album where I'm like, the only way you can be in your 40s, have been doing this for 20 something years, and to improve and sound even more aggressive is if you're training the way he does, you
yeah,
know?
and I've done those workouts, and they're psychotic, and
Oh, dude, they look insane.
yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely, you know, uh, I got to a point where I was like deadlifting close to 400 pounds, and my
Holy
neck was
shit.
like this big, like in 2012, and
Oh
I
my
weighed
God.
more than ever, and I couldn't put my arms behind my back, and I was like, what the hell am I training for?
Yeah.
But he's like, I want to make warriors. I want to make, like when I was talking to him, he's like, I want to make whoever comes in this gym just look crazy. And I know he goes on record talking about how he doesn't want, or he's not a fan of watching these out of shape reunion bands, and
Yeah.
these guys who can't sing all the way through their songs. I mean,
Hmm.
and to me, that was always a thing too, because I was struggling, at that point in time with seizures, getting through a full set where it was like after 3 songs, I was winded and I still had 2 more to sing. And
Fuck. Yeah.
I like, was like, show me the way, dude. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Man. Who better to show you than fucking Brandon Chapati?
Yeah, dude. He's a wild one. It's cool to see everybody still doing it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Cameron, seriously, thank you so much for coming on. Like, this is amazing. It's really it's tapped into a lot of selfishly a lot of cool like lore and stories for me personally. Just having us both having come from the Southern California scene.
Mhm.
Is there anyone you want to thank? Anyone you want to shout out on here?
Um, Shout out. I don't know, just all the sick bands right now. Shout out Lockslip. Um, they're they're like a chaotic hardcore mathcore band right now, and Noah, their drummer, was helping DUHKHA out a lot before Matt joined recently. So
Hmm.
we wouldn't have been able to continue play within these walls without Noah from
Fuck yeah.
Lockslip. So
That's
that's a
so
big
funny.
one.
I just came across their Instagram like 3 days ago.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
sick. They're
Yeah.
really cool.
Fucking like and what about Blind Wolf? Do you know about them?
I know the name. I don't know if I've checked them out yet. Are
Yeah,
they
because
sick?
I yeah, they're fucking awesome.
Mm.
Kind of that mathcore, like kind of like botchy, like twangy riffs, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, think you would love them. They're from Orange County.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I gotta
Yeah.
check them out.
Yeah, they're sick. Blind Wolf.
Tight.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, hell yeah. Thank you, man. And
Yeah,
yeah, we'll
man.
talk soon.
Thank you, dude. This is fun. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Talk soon, Cameron.
All right. See you, man.